Hi, I'm Philip Bither. I'm the curator for performing arts at the Walker Arts Center, and here with Pavel Pyś, who's a curator in the visual art program and has been working closely with Sarah Michelson and myself on new acquisition by Sarah for the Walker Permanent Collection. And this is a chance just for us to have a conversation about life in general, our history together, and this new work. So Sarah, it's May 11th. We're about 2 months into the coronavirus shutdown. I'm just wondering, how are you faring and what's going on with you? I know you just made a big move personally as well. I don't know how you did that in the middle of a pandemic, but anyway, how's it going?
Yeah, I guess I think like everybody, it's super up and down, roller coaster style situation. Yeah, we just moved house, which was insane. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I personally have felt very disconnected from any feeling of understanding any relevance of art in this time, which I know is confusing as people sort of like fight to, save small organizations and have like massive fiscal and budgetary like drive to make sure the cultural side of the city and the country continues to be supported. I'm like, just like, what the fuck is art? I don't know. It has like zero meaning to me right now at all.
Right.
And yet my identity as a person is super tied up with my relationship to the practices that I've lived. So I'm a little discombobulated because I'm identity free. and
Yeah.
and so that makes me feel sort of very like naive and stupid and confused. And then, like I'm at home with Prudence and she's on school doing Zoom and homeschooling. And so it's like my life as a mother is constant. I have no separation from it, and she has no separation from me. So that's a very electrifying experience also.
Yeah.
I'm curious also.
It's just really confusing. It's honestly just really confusing.
Right.
Like I'm sure you guys are. I'm on Zoom a lot. I'm in Zoom meetings with the artists I've been working with at Performance Space, and with those people I'm on Zoom meetings about basically everything. Reading emails about like, fundraising initiatives, trying to help with research, trying to talk to Lily, trying to help LMCC, trying to think about strategies, and at the same time, just like, I don't know, art seems to have a lot of ego in it now to me, really, or I don't have any interest in watching online content, almost zero online content. A couple of things have felt meaningful, but mostly I'm just like, I don't even want to see these emails with online content. So I don't mean that as an asshole to people who are producing them. It's just like having a really hard time.
There's such an onslaught. There's just so much. There's so much content that's coming. I'm curious, Sarah, it might be too early to talk about this, but one of the things about dance and performance is so much about gathering together in a space. And I'm curious if you've had any thoughts how, your work and how the dance world will change once we're able to actually get back together.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I have this feeling, I have no sense of predictory, like, reality. I do think that for some dance artists, the online forum is very powerful and interesting, and the cinema of personal activity, or like, the cinema of their own home and their dancing body, like, can make a lot of sense. And so I think that there's a lot of that. And then for me, I'm everything about me or who I am is, like, to do with viscerality, like energetic exchange, as in like this sort of performance style energetic, construction of energetic exchange or something. So for me, I'm at home and I know where I am. And if I start dancing around, I do. And it feels even performative, but I wouldn't invite you to look at it, not
Right.
because I think it's awesome, but because that's not what the exchange is happening in a way that I think does not translate. But in terms of predictive, I don't know. What I do feel across the board when I hear groups of people talking, different groups, like different communities that I'm in, what I do feel is I feel like it's I feel like it's like a worldwide or global snakeskin shedding, like that we're living among the detritus of the mechanisms that created how we behave and slightly who we are, like our work or how we go to work or how we converse or what we drink at the bar, or like all these like mechanisms that have sort of defined us and become us are like sort of like falling off like detritus because they're not like useful right now, like there's only so many Zoom cocktails or whatever,
Right. Yeah.
Hi, happy birthday, like whatever it is. So then there's this detritus that was sort of the system that we lived by, but also had sort of I guess constructive matter as a part of it, like the clothes you wear, I don't know, whatever.
Right.
You do. And so I feel like I'm kind of like wading through that detritus all the time, every moment of the day in my house. Oh my God, get out of the way.
Especially now that you've moved, Sarah.
No, like there's no mechanism that's taken its place. It's just kind of like a sprawl of autistic matter. Yeah, unformed. So I don't know if that answered the question.
Do you think that detritus, I mean, a lot of people are talking about a much needed structural change, that this is maybe some kind of wake up call for the way the arts and performing arts in particular industries functioned? And do you think there's
I was reading that document that went out, that I got it from Karen.
Yeah.
I guess I feel like it's
This is Karen
I
Sherman.
don't know if it's so 1 + 1 = 2, but
Right.
or I don't know if 1 + 1 does equal 2, actually. They say it does.
Yeah.
I don't know if 1 + 1 = 2, but I do think that the quietude I think that it is a contemplative period.
Right.
And I think there's a forced contemplation in this. People are with themselves and are recentering their activities to their home, so where you sleep, where you go to the bathroom, where you construct yourself is also where you're producing yourself. So I think there's like a sense of compartmentalizing orders dissolving, also maybe being detritus, and in that maybe there is a way to actually look at what has previously manifested and how we might want to restructure it. Yeah, and I guess I found that I haven't completed reading that document, but I thought that the effort of it and the sort of the precision of it was super admirable. And
Right. Yeah. I was thinking about your own practice, and as you developed the last cycle and the work became less collaborative and more internally focused, and you depended more on your own body, your history, and then you began to move into this transition in some ways from performative practice to the creation of an installation. Had you already moved into kind of centering your work over the cycle into a more individual practice that just now is a necessity for so many others to function in that way? And does it make it easier for you to continue to create?
That's a great question. I think it's sort of a complicated question. I think that I think we talked about this before, but I think that I basically, in terms of trying to get to the root of like action, or like the old question of like, what's a dance, or like,
right,
why does a dance even matter, or what's important about it, or where does it start, or I started to realize that even with one other person in the room, I was constructing in the action of like attempting to construct something that would be able to read back and have sort of at its heart like constructive success, even if it was like a face in the mud or whatever. It would still have a kind of like constructive success, because I would be making decisions that another person would be interpreting and working with. And so I realized that if I really wanted to work in this sort of, if I wanted to work in a truly like non-capitalist way, a way that could not be captured, then the only way right now that I could understand how to do that would be without any translation, without any third party, and work on my own body. It's pretty like grueling and lonely and painful and disgusting most of the time, but I'm definitely learning a lot from it. And yeah, like it was a procedure of starting to understand that through that cycle of work. Yeah. But then moving into the kind of the acquisition part of it actually has been very collaborative with not only like in the instigative, like it's a deep collaboration with you, Philip Bither, whether or not you wanna admit that or be part of it. It's a deep collaboration with you. I would not be, for many reasons, I would have made the work that I made at the Walker without that in so many ways that work came from our relationship, as did the visit to the quarry, which was then the animation that became the beginning of what the acquisition now is. So very collaborative in that way. And then deep collaborators, Paula, Karen, Mike, and then now of course Eamon,
right,
helping make all the mechanisms, and then finally Pavel.
But maybe we should we should maybe clarify some of these things for those who will be listening to us. So we've been talking about, on the one hand,
clarification is not my favorite thing to do, just to be clear though.
maybe we'll give a few ingredients then.
Okay.
One thing that we should start with maybe is the title. And I'm going to say it out loud because it has a graphic element as well, but // March 2020 in brackets, the number 4 PB and brackets. So we're talking about this piece which just came into the collection right before all of us went into lockdown. And I think there's so much to unpack, but I'm curious, the work that you're referencing, and especially your relationship with Philip, the most recent instance being the piece presented in October. But / I'd love to ask you, Sarah, and I know that we're not going to clarify, but maybe we're going to just set some groundwork. Can you talk about the / and the /, which is kind of two hands or like a tent, but it's something that you've used in a series of works that have led all the way pretty much to this acquisition. Maybe we could start with that.
Yeah, so I guess I was trying to figure out, when I started this, I was trying to figure out how to basically acknowledge that the way I work, I was trying to deal with the funding system actually at first, and the way I work, and be really honest about it. And the way I work is that I'm working on a continuum. I mean, I know everybody is, but I'm working on a continuum that that feels very specific in terms of developing a practice and watching the practice unfold and change in my life and in my daily practices and in what I'm doing. And some of those things, and then having that work meet circumstances that are like production schedules, like on a timeline, knowing that it's not a touring work, but for a touring work to be funded, it has to have the same title. And that I'm going to actually make an entirely new work in each situation. And so I felt like, and I guess I'm still in this mode, that time stamping my practice of producing work gave me the most freedom, clarity, and honesty about admitting what I'm doing, which is I am working in the framework of this, which is the future past. You know what I mean? It's the future and the past together. It's like but you know, it's like it's like it is a continuum,
bridge, right.
and then I'm time stamping the work so that they have their own, absolutely own identity. They don't have the same anything except the development of my thinking around what I'm producing while I'm doing it. So, and this one, the last one, this recent acquisition and my first ever acquisition, like agreement to be bought or whatever, of performance, which I have so many questions about.
So did we.
Yeah. Is for Philip Bither, 4PP is for Philip Bither because the work goes into the acquisition as a result of the institution's dedication to me and the extension of me, like the performance community of Minneapolis that have consistently been around me while I make my work and made my relationship with them very generously. And so there's a way in which I feel like for Philip Bither acknowledges Philip and his work and what it's meant to me and to performance in New York City, and you know, and also acknowledges that the work is in the collection as a condition of being directly related, as a condition of being from performance, directly from performance. Sorry, that was really garbled.
No, I think you're touching upon many points that we want to talk about. And I think one thing that I'm very curious for you is that this was a new step in that it's not a live dance. It's so rooted in performance, but it takes materially the form of an installation. And I'm curious if maybe you could share, what was that experience like for you to move into that direction, which is...
Yeah, pretty hellish, honestly, like pretty grueling. Like so the original animation that took place in one day in the Rainbow Quarry with Philip, Paula Court, Mike Iverson, Karen Sherman, and Tim and Dan.
Tim and Dan, who are the guys who helped us, who work at the quarry and helped make it a day happen in the quarry, which is the same quarry that we produced Merce Cunningham's Ocean about 10 years earlier.
Which is why I was there.
Yeah,
it was super direct. And so we're down there, we have Paula and me instead of Merce and Charlie or whatever, you know, but
Paula's documented your work since the start, pretty much, hasn't it?
Totally. Yeah. I have a deep old relationship with Paula. We also did yoga teacher training together in the 90s. So we shot that. We didn't really know what we were doing, but I was like, we're gonna go and shoot it. And me and Mike did that's kind of like the May 2018 sort of performance in the quarry in 2 locations while Paula shot it, and Philip and Karen took care of us and also recorded sound on their cell phones. And the result of that was this animation, algorithmic animation against the sound from Philip and Karen's cell phones and Paula's shots, and moving at the speed of my own hand into an animation constructed by Eamon. That was in my show.
It was in the Best Buy Aperture, the small corridor between Perlman Gallery and Burnett Gallery, and you screened it on loop And that's really where the conversation started.
Well, as well as there was a smaller screen within the installation in Perlman, where it was you could also see that stop action.
And then I was also hand jiggering it onto Ralph Lemon's boxed up neon.
That's
Remember
right.
that?
Yeah. Bruce Melvin.
Yeah. So then the conversation was that I had never felt like I had made anything that I would ever want to sell, or like, you know, sort of money wasn't really a part of it. But I had this feeling that I don't know, should belong to the Walker, because it was made entirely in relationship to the history of performance there, my own history, you know, Ralph's implied in it, like, yeah. And
Merce's history.
Yeah, exactly. And my history with Merce, I mean, like, ugh, you know. So so then I guess you guys felt the same, and yeah, so then I had to consider, okay, what does that mean? How would that be seen? All the questions that you asked me, Pavel. Would there be a video screening room? Like, we could build role. We walked around with a projector. I shone it on walls. And then I was like, okay, it should just be on a wall. It should be like a painting, like whatever that was. And then I got back to New York to start working on it, and borrowed the as yet unrebuilt artist space, the new artist space. I started working on it, and immediately was like, I need a second projector, and started to construct a destabilizing world around already a destabilized world that takes place in. So it was grueling because I didn't try to, and I don't want to, make a piece of quote unquote visual art that has a stability or value actually in any context. And deciding to do that made me feel personally very sick almost every day. And so the process was to be able to have the works that show up in this final work exist and be viscerally present, and also for the work to be unstable enough that there's nothing reliable about it.
I think what you said earlier is, and I don't want to dwell on the term too much, but you said constructive energetic exchange. And there's, you know, what we're talking about, your piece really embodies that. You started with this moment where you were looking, our conversation started with this stop motion animation rooted in this private moment in the quarry, and then you expanded it into touching upon a totally different body of your work, Devotion from the Whitney, and then you conceived of a dialogue between these two very different moments within this incredibly shifting, strange, chaotic, random, because it's driven by an algorithm, situation. So it feels very contingent. It's not something that, as you say, it's certainly not a painting that we can just put straight up on the wall and walk away and we're done. It's always changing. But I'm very curious what that means to think about that sense of change, which is rooted in objects rather than in the body. There's a difference there, and it's interesting to hear you talk about those challenges.
Yeah, I think that I have some trust that that how I got to everything is from this sort of like neuro condition of the dancing body, my own vibrational anger and frustration and sadness, and that has created the dancer that I am alongside all the other dancers worldwide. And that the viscerality of that and the aging of that and the destabilization of that shows up inside the content of the animations in some literal ways and some abstract ways, and also inside the way that Eamon is like so brilliant and so sensitive about how he works with me, that the algorithms that operate the thing that we've studied and that we will do more study of on the first installation, which will be really crucial, are from the sort of perceptual, I guess, like rhythms of me as a dancer, dance maker, and of my history there in the Walker, which is why so that first install is going to be really important, you know, and like also to have Karen around so that she'll be hopefully part of like building that algorithm too. And you know, yeah, so I think it's the algorithm is being built from like from the vacuums created against and where the action isn't or something. The vacuum where that, yeah. Sorry, again, so garbled.
I think what for me was really interesting about the dialogue and exchange with you, and I know this from having seen your live work, and I know that you're constantly interested in questioning, you know, when, how, where can dance be? And it was the same with the acquisition, which is, you know, when I would say, well, this might need a stanchion, you would say, I'm going to make my own stanchion. Or this might need to be here, we might need to conceive of this. I'm going to question that. And I think that is something that for us as a collecting institution, we're trying to face more and more, which is how do we ensure that what comes into the collection can continue to live and breathe and refuse stability, and that what is our role in carrying that?
Totally.
So we're talking about a work that has come into the collection but has not been presented yet, ever publicly. I think you previewed it, kind of the work in progress to friends, but we've never actually shown it yet. So I'm curious, we should record another conversation like this once we've presented it.
Yeah, totally. When I'm freaking out, probably.
I think maybe this is a moment where we could talk a little bit about control. And I'm curious, how do you feel that an acquisition feels in regards to control? Because when you're presenting a live work, the parameters are different. You can control space and time and audience reaction in a different way. But with an acquisition and a work in a gallery space, you can't. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
I am terrified about that. I mean, I think like I'm putting a lot of the destabilizing with like how it works algorithmically and like really fine tuning that is sort of the only way that I'm able to handle it. Was that basically no one knows what it's going to do, including me. But I still will know more than anybody. You know, you'll all be left with less than I know, no matter what. So, yeah, but that is the hardest part, and it's you know, the part that probably you and I will go back and forth on a lot in different categories of publicity, category, you know, all of that stuff until the final, like, letting go post the first install where I just have to sign off.
Was there anything, was there anything similar, I'm curious, in the moment when, I think in the mid 2000s, Sarah, when you had stopped for a while being in your own pieces, and was there anything similar in that moment where you were moving from being your body being in the piece to actually choreographing others? Was there anything similar in that moment?
That's a really good question. That's a really good example of the overarching continuum of the whole thing. So yeah, like originally I was in my work, actually, like, yeah, I was in my work, okay. I was in San Francisco and I wanted to be in other people's work or something. And I remember I went to an audition, I didn't get it. And I was like, fuck that. Then I'm my own subject. So I started making my own work with my own body central with other people in it. And then, so for many years then sort of, I did of course work with other people too, but I had this shifting group until it became Mike, Greg, Parker, and me. But shifting group like Julie Muse and me and Shree Louise and like all these, this kind of shifting group where, my body would make the movements. We would all do the movements, and we were a team of friends. You know, really, I guess it's a really common way that younger dance artists start working. You know, you work with your friends, and you. And then at a certain point, I felt like I couldn't understand what was me and what was them in terms of input. Like I felt like for my own kind of survival, I needed to know. But it came at a time where sort of everyone was starting to do different things. Like Parker got married and wanted to take a break and have a baby, and Jennifer Howard got married and wanted to take a break and have a baby, and Mike started being an actor. So it kind of came at this time where I had to replace people, and it became really clear that right then. And then I started working with the kids in Cardiff and so that felt great. I had like a lot of control, a lot of separation. I wasn't, I had started finding it really hard to be in control of all the scenography, all the lighting, everything that I can't, the control freak can't let anyone else do. And also then perform. I was like, fuck, like the 2 hours before the show, I was getting injured a lot because I wouldn't warm up, because I'd be like, okay, really, I mean, I still don't warm up really, but like, yeah. So then I started, like being outside of it. And then that seemed much more logical and much more true or something, or it wasn't based on our personalities anymore. It was actually based on the rudiments of the work. And maybe that's when I was dealing with, like more like the history, dance theory, like, formal problems or something.
Right.
I don't know. And then, but yeah, objecthood. Like like that work is now very hard for me to look at actually at this moment. I'm just like, oh, it's disgusting. I mean, then the sort of the move back into my body, has somehow came from all that knowledge. Like, you know what I mean? Like my body was like a visceral entity in performance, and that's how I started. That's where my information is. So I'm returning to the hub of the information. But interestingly, like the acquisition it's going to be interesting because it doesn't feel like a dance without a dancer, and it also doesn't feel like an art object, thank God. But it is on a time cycle. You could watch an hour or something, you could watch it. So it's like, it's bizarre. So I guess that my understanding of what that will actually be when we finally install it is still a little, I'm not quite done with like tying the knot on that and understanding what that is. But yeah, Pavel, those things are related. In a like, yeah, the practitioner, the dancer, the object. Yeah, so the times when I wasn't in my dance, yes, are more similar to this, although I'm hoping that this will have less objecthood than some of those dancers did.
Is it fair to sort of summarize this work in a way that you really weren't aiming to create an art object, that you insisted on a continued destabilized element, i.e. the randomness that you built into the work, and still a time-based creation to a certain extent. So that, did you feel that was a way to sort of preserve the liveness that is so critical to your performative work?
Yeah, I do think that is the basis of me being able to hand this over, is somehow how it plays out in time. You know,
how does the question of permanence, when it comes to, you know, collecting practices in the art world in general and museum practices, you know, the notion that you and Pavel had to sort through a lot of this, like, what does this work, what will it mean 50 years from now, or how does an institution preserve it long term and things like that? Did those issues or questions come up for you much in the process of making it, or in the acquisition process with the Walker?
Yeah, those questions are really paramount, I think. I think that for example, I'm going to figure out with Pavel how there will be no wall text. So there will, because contextualization is very powerful in terms of lens. And it's not something, as you guys know, it's not like I'm just resisting the museum doing that. I don't do it. I don't write a blurb, or I don't preempt the view on live work, because I think the exposure, the wind of it is the thing of it, and language and sort of like paraded intellectualism or POV on it is unhelpful. It's only helpful for the person who's writing that. It's not helpful. I refuse to believe that it's helpful. Maybe the year that it was made, you know, sure, but that's, you know what I mean? And then research is a different thing. It's like, you know, it's like basically sliced bread or make your own, you know what I mean? It's like, everyone knows not to go to the store and buy whatever, white sliced bread. So it's the same thing.
I think for us, it's two things. And
because it just helps you digest, you know, it's so much easier to digest.
Good metaphor.
You know? Yeah.
I think there are two things. One is that part of the, you know, the acquisition came with material assets. It came with paintings, it came with robots, it came with, you know, hardware, software, moving image material. And we worked with a time-based media consultant, Small Data Industries.
Awesome person, Nick.
They were really great, Nick and Ben. Yeah. And they really helped us understand, you know, how this can continue to live in the future. So we do have the eye, of course, towards preserving and maintaining. But what we will be working on, Sarah, and what we will be finishing is thinking about, well, those questions of intention and how intention translates into the placement of the work in the gallery and its display, which can change in the future.
Yeah.
Us trying to work that out within and beyond your lifetime, that will be the next step. And that's where, I mean, the piece of...
Hopefully I don't die between now and then, because then we'll be
Don't even say it.
Oh, I thought you guys had already worked all that out.
Almost. We're 80% there. But I think that's something that is super important to us. I mean, of course we have works that are similar in some ways, that they're instructional, or there are elements that slightly shift, but here it's about capturing, which is what Nick and Ben did with the software for you, is capturing your intention and then understanding how as an institution we materialize that later. And then I'm wondering if maybe we could talk a little bit about, you know, this piece has such a relationship. I think maybe it's worth just touching upon it a little bit more, to Merce. It's multi-layered, and I'm wondering, Sarah, if you would like to talk about it, because I think the layers for me that are apparent is, of course, the coming back to the quarry, the relationship to ocean, but also your story of training with Merce in the 90s, and then devotion that features in the work as so soon after his passing and references Merce. I'm wondering if you could maybe talk a bit about that.
Yeah. okay, I'm a dancer on a continuum of dance and dance history. And that particular history, the history of Merce Cunningham, or being in training with Merce and deep friendships with many dancers from that time. My first show was at Merce Cunningham Studios. And deeply loving and respecting that work and those dancers, and finding that work to have a constant currency in some way, and at the same time being so angry too about you know, the brutality of it, the brutality of that work, the negation of the dancer in some ways in that work, as well as the, you know, adulation of the dancer, and like, you know, the sort of anger that I have. I don't know, like, what is my relationship to the history of dance as it shows up in my body, and also as I live as a person, and also as a woman, as a cunt, you know, like, what's my relationship to all that? How am I living that? It's a duality, it's a warring duality. And I'll go to, you know, bat and defend and protect that work and its history. And, you know, I'll be like, the trust is fucking it up. You know, I'll be like really powerfully emotional about it. And at the same time, I want to shatter that history and recreate it with like some powerful womanhood that isn't Martha Graham, that has that kind of intellectualism. I don't know, sorry, scratch that, cut that part. But also this sort of, this gendered anger, I guess I want to say, about the female body and my female body and dancing, and repression and yeah, but like I say, it's a duality because it simply is the way I've lived as a dancer. So the work has all that in it, some direct, some indirect, you know, like the direct parts are my relationship with Philip, me being there for the opening of Common Time, those last Cunningham events taking place, me asking how they could happen like that. You know, the history of all that is, you can ask me, Philip, about that personally. And then me saying that I want that stage, that, okay, for this, I want that stage in that gallery, and I'm going to be the dancer and the composer, and I'm going to deal with that history in my body. And then on a gallery visit, Adrian Edwards' show was still in there with Ralph's work.
Perfect
Bruce
storm.
Nauman. And I was like on my way to the quarry to fuck Merce Cunningham and love him, just how Ralph was fucking Bruce Nauman and loving him. And then me and Ralph are so close. So this whole thing, yes, Cunningham, but also yes, Ralph Lemon, you know, like the history of the Walker, our history in that architecture, our embodied histories as dancers also in New York City, mine and Ralph's friendship and relationship, his relationship with Philip, his relationship with Kathy, my relationship with Philip, my relationship with Kathy, you know, like all of that.
Kathy Hallbrush. Right.
Yeah. So all of that basically is in the work. And I think that I guess I want to say that I think all the things I've made or done in the context of presenting something, performance or something, are to do with the people who are around me and with me, you know, all my collaborators over time. And then, yeah, certainly like in a way that dance that whole dance was about and for my relationship with Philip Bither and the arguments that we have about dance, and also Karen Sherman and Morgan and Kristen Van Loon, and like those people who have a relationship and care also to dance and the history of dance, and Minneapolis and New York City and how those things are interfacing. Yeah, the geography of the world of aesthetics in dance form in America, well, in those two cities, but let's say it. Yeah. I don't know if that answered that question either.
No,
but
it did.
Yeah, it did. And our conversations and your presence during the opening of Common Time and your strong feelings about how can Merce's work even still exist after his death. And also, I don't know if you remember, we early on had talked about, was it of interest to have one of these, for us to award one of these commissions related to Common Time? And there was a clear decision not to, to step back from that direct lineage, publicly, but to continue to think about that history. This leads me to a question about that visit to the quarry, which I think of it now as, and it was, we were really didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue why we were going up there and what we were doing, other than this history with Cunningham. And I really admired, again, at that moment, your process of totally following your instincts. You didn't really know what would come of it, but at the same time being incredibly specific that you knew you wanted Mike there, you knew you wanted Paula there, you knew you wanted it documented, you knew something would happen in that space. And but I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, you really had a clue what would result from it necessarily. So it's
not at all. No, not at all. I didn't know at all. I just thought, I knew it would be something, I knew it'd be documented. I thought it might be something that would be on the wall, or photos, or in a TV, we would make a movie of it or something. And then, yeah, so it's just so funny then, the whole thing, totally. Yeah. It was a crazy day. We got there and then we just suddenly went into it, and then we were shooting for whatever that was. I don't know, 7 hours or something, in
95 degrees
plastic pants, and and that phenomenon, that whole brick wall fell down. Remember?
Yeah,
whole
totally.
Sheet of wall fell down, which is possibly a huge quarry phenomenon that doesn't really happen.
80 or 90 feet high.
Yeah. We got in the car on the way home, and we were all like, "Whoa."
Right.
What just happened? Something happened. We just felt it, all of us. So it almost felt I had a responsibility to whatever the magic, it sounds so hippie, but whatever the sort of energetic magic of that was, to hand that back. Yeah.
When I just I happened to still have a few of the videos on my phone, and I was last night looking at some of them, and at this moment in time, I mean, that's those solos and the duets with Mike, they were so deeply sad and so much about loss and about isolation. They felt like they really spoke to this moment right now. Of course, cancer and loss of good friends and other things were informing that moment, but I wonder, and especially in that desolated, isolated, raw and semi-empty, but still spectacular landscape, I wonder how you think about that imagery now and that moment in relationship to what the world is going through right now, or can you bring yourself back to that moment around what was going on emotionally and things?
Yeah, well, the loss of Sam
Miller, who's a good friend of us both.
I guess it's such a good question, Philip. It felt about sort of what I'd said to Pavel earlier, but about my own body, my own life lived as a dancer, the end of that or something too, the end of that era, the annihilate, Sam's death, cancer in our lives, there's kind of a kind of exorcism also, like a saying no more, like no more. And yeah, I think I felt very hopeless when Sam died. Like I really felt like I lost a spiritual leader or something, or a guardian or something.
Yeah.
And somehow all that related to dance and the history of dance, or the history of like the true avant-garde, you know, like as not as represented by sorry but morons like Alistair Macaulay, like, but the true avant-garde, like the true preciousness of risk with the body and risk with perceptual living, so that art is not the same as entertainment. It, you know, that it isn't necessarily supposed to be a good time out.
Sure.
And it isn't supposed to necessarily be like, oh my God, that was so great. You know, is art doing its job if it's that? I don't know. And then how all our egos were involved in that. Like even me, like I make the, you know, work that's difficult, and like people walk out or they don't like it all the time, but still I'm kind of like, oh, that means I suck. But even though I intended to do that, you know, it's just like, and like the willingness to kind of just grapple with the sorrow and the ego and the humiliation of what it means to be yourself without guardianship, without Sam, you know, alongside my, you know, Philip, who I then like, you know, came second after Sam, you know, like they, so it's, so yeah. But yeah, about dance, about dancing, about the history of dance, about in my body for myself, but, you know, I'm not wanting to be presumptuous, but also for the, you know, like the difficulty for dancers and for people who dedicate their lives to this, who live it, you know. Yeah. Sorry, again, I feel like I'm all over the fucking place.
No, it's taking me certainly back to that moment, and I was, you know, just struck.
Wait, hold on 1 second. I gotta let my cat out of this room. Hold on. Come on, you wanna go out, Mitch? Yeah. Come on, Mitch, you wanna go out there? Go find him. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
No
I know we don't have that much time left, but I wonder, Pavel, if you had last questions, or I guess.
Well, I don't know if I want to open this can of worms, but
oh shit.
But I was rereading the interview that you did with Ralph Lemon and Philip as part of the Triple Canopy issue on value. And I'm curious now that, you know, there's such the tension that, especially in the mid 2000s, of this kind of flirtation between the visual and dance worlds. And then your piece coming into the collection and this question of the canon, you know, what does it mean for a visual arts permanent collection to hold a work by yours? And what does it mean for your work to be there? What does that do to, I mean, I think there are many canons. I think there are many power structures, but what does it do to be placed in that context?
Well, in my highfalutin dreams, I guess because I wasn't trying to, or have no intention to make a visual artwork that holds a value related to other visual artworks, or like I wasn't trying to figure out how to get collected, or how, I didn't think it was an attempt to, even though you guys have recently inquired, you know, you acquired Ralph's work, or that's what we were discussing. I was there by mistake, by the way, for that day. That was supposed to be interviewed just between Philip and Ralph, and I happened to be there. And they got me in on it, or maybe I pushed myself in on it. I can't remember which way it went, actually, one of those ways.
Ralph and I talked you into it.
Yeah. But where Ralph, I know, has been very interested in like taking on this idea of like, how would performance be acquired? And in some way, and like in a different way than Maria, who is also figuring that out, but as performance itself.
Maria Hasabi.
Hasabi, yeah. You know, when we were thinking about, you know, the Walker acquiring, and I talked to different people about it, some people were like, oh, you should have them buy the set, or you should, I don't know, like but I didn't have an interest in having a performance of mine acquired, and I still don't. And that's the kind of the eye of the needle thing that I'm threading. And so what I would hope it would mean, although I don't at all attempt to say that I would achieve this, because I think it's maybe not achievable, or certainly I'm not maybe smart enough or advanced enough yet, but maybe it's a nod or a bend towards that. You know, the collection can get a little dirty. Mm-hmm. That actually it can pick up a piece of shit and be like, why not? Mm-hmm. Why is this less valuable than that? We're not sure why, so we better have it next to the other stuff, just to show that we know how to bend our knees and pick something up. We don't only lift it from, you know what I mean? I think that there's a way in which maybe it would force an expanded breadth of questions of value and being willing, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Being willing to be humiliated also as part of your job.
I think that's a great.
Again, I don't know what I'm betting right now.
I think that's a great answer. I think, yeah, I mean, it's a provocation, an irritation, a form of antagonizing and questioning. Why? Who makes? Who? It's like the guest that makes the party just that much better.
Yeah, and at the same time, you know, I'm going to try and do a really good job. I'm not trying to give you a piece of shit, literally. You know what I mean? I will do my best to, you know, make something. I mean, I care about it. You know, it's not like I'm like, oh yeah,
sure,
I pulled that off, and I'm antagonistic towards you. No, I intend it to be a real exchange. That has porosity problems. You know, like has leakage or whatever. Mm.
I think that's a good point at which to say that we're really excited and thankful that you were willing to share what is essentially a preview of the piece with our audiences. We're all in lockdown, and when we emerge, we'll be able to start making exhibitions again. But I'm grateful, Sarah, to you that you were open to talking about the piece with our audiences, and I can't wait to see it in the galleries.
Cool.
Me too. It's like our next project together.
Totally.
Differently than maybe a work we've acquired that will be part of a group, you know, show or something down the road. This feels still very alive, and a lot still some things to work out. And I appreciate how the two of you have sorted through a lot of challenging things to sort of have your work live in this other world, while at the same time challenge that world. Cool.
Thanks, Philip.
Yeah. Sarah,
well, it's for you, as you know. It's for you.
Well, thank you, but I'm glad this all happened, and I appreciate Pavel's advocacy and the partnership on
Me
it
too.
all.
Thanks, Pavel.
Yeah.
Totally. Thanks so much. Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
On that note,
okay.
Have a great day.
Yeah.
You too.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye, guys.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.